To those who haven't seen and the ones who haven't heard, allow me to please introduce myself. Your residential long for buck who really didn't come from much, and who plans to change the world for good before his time is up. Marcus Aurelius is prodigy, that's the way I train. Inscribe momentum.
Hey guys, it's Eric here and I'm back with another video. An important video as it marks my return to YouTube content uploading, but an important video also because it represents the commencement of a new series I'm going to be running on my channel. For those who do not know, I have recently graduated with an undergraduate degree in law, and a not so hard earned privilege this has earned me is the ability to see the glaring gap between the goings on in the courtroom, especially during high profile legal cases that involve celebrities, and the discourse in the ever notorious court of public opinion. Thus, a new initiative will begin on my channel known as the PT5 series, through which I'll be exploring high-profile cases through the lens of what actually occurred in the courtroom, the evidence presented, and the conclusions arrived at by the judge or jury. Separately, I'm going to be sharing my own perspectives based upon questions of public policy and cultural points that I think each case teaches us. I appreciate the various political analyses, theoretical perspectives, hot takes, and let's be honest, conspiracy theories that the court of public opinion offers to dissect cases, but the problem with these, apart from the fact that they at times fail to appreciate material evidence and too strongly rely on hearsay, he says, she says evidence, is that too often the desired conclusion of the case precedes the process. In other words, despite the evidence produced and the material occurrences that take place during the case, people have pre-decided preferred outcomes based upon inherently subjective doctrines and perspectives. This, as a student of the law, gives me the ick. The first case covered by the PT5 series, you ask? The people of the state of California versus Michael Joe Jackson.
At every opportunity, the media has dissected and manipulated these allegations to reach their own conclusions. I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
Michael Jackson is quite possibly the most famous man to ever live, the greatest entertainer and musician to ever exist, and one of the world's most prolific philanthropists, recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records for the length of his philanthropic works and donating an estimated $500 million to charities, particularly charities for terminally ill and disadvantaged children. His legacy, however, has been marred by allegations of child sexual abuse, most popularly culminating in an out-of-court settlement in 1993, a criminal trial in 2005, and a one-sided documentary known as Leaving Neverland that was released in 2019. This case is concerned with the 2005 criminal trial, which after the O.J. Simpson trial has been dubbed by many as the trial of the century. This trial involves allegations of molestation that were brought forward by a young boy called Gavin Arvizo and his family. Before looking at the trial directly, however, I think it's important to look at the chronology of events leading up to the trial in 2005. I believe that for the purpose of this video, it's necessary to firstly acknowledge the 1993 allegations brought against Michael Jackson, which was the first time any allegations of child molestation were made against Mr. Jackson. The details of the case will not intricately be explored as it's the 2005 case that's the subject of this video, but three important facets pertaining to the case will be looked at and briefly discussed now. The first is the media misrepresentation of the legal process underpinning the 1993 allegations. The second are the mysterious elements surrounding the case. And the third is the alleged ill prosecutorial motives of Tom Sneddon, the district attorney of Santa Barbara County, California, and the lead prosecutor in both Jackson's 1993 and 2005 cases. If you look at headlines in the media, you'll see titles such as Wacko Jacko, which was the disparaging nickname the media latched onto Michael Jackson well before the allegations were ever made, pays $20 million to silence victim. And these titles refer to the 1993 case involving a young boy called Jordan Chandler. Michael Jackson was accused of sexually abusing Jordan Chandler in the early 90s, and though the media headlines would have you believe Jackson paid the allegations away, the picture is much more complicated. Firstly, before the allegations were publicly brought against Michael Jackson, the Chandlers had asked for a sum of money from Jackson, using the possibility of disclosing the allegations to the public as a threat to induce his payment. Jackson overtly refused to make the payment and wanted instead to go to court and prove his innocence. Secondly, there were two legal elements to the case, a civil element and a criminal element. Child sexual abuse is both a civil wrong and a criminal wrong under the law. A civil wrong is a wrong committed against an individual, usually leading to monetary sanction as a punishment. A criminal wrong or crime is seen as a wrong committed against the state, leading to monetary sanction and at worst, a loss of liberty or incarceration. In this matter, the day in court for the civil case preceded the one for the criminal case, and Jackson's lawyers tried to have the criminal case occur first, for fear that the prosecution could see the evidence they produced in the civil case and muster a strategy to overcome it in the criminal case, where more was at stake, obviously, Jackson's liberty. The court refused to change the dates, and so Jackson's team decided it was best to financially settle the civil case and focus exclusively on the criminal case. The criminal case fell apart, however, as two grand juries decided there was not enough evidence on the part of the prosecution, the Chandlers, to mount an accusation against Jackson, and because the Chandlers stopped cooperating with their legal team and the process of pursuing a criminal sanction against Jackson once they had received the financial settlement from the civil case. Furthermore, there were strange aspects surrounding the father of the boy who was allegedly abused, whose name is Evan Chandler. Here's an excerpt from a recorded phone conversation involving Evan Chandler around the time of the allegations.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief.
Yeah.
He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record.
This attorney I found, I interviewed several, and I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find. Once I make that phone call, this guy is just going to destroy everybody in sight in any devious, nasty, cruel way that he can do it. And I've given him full authority to do that. It'll be a massacre if I don't get what I want.
If I go through with this, I win big time.
I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again.
Yeah.
That's fact, Dave. That's what's
Does that help?
Michael's career will be over.
Does that help Jordy?
Michael's career will be over.
And does that help Jordy?
That's irrelevant to me.
To make matters more odd, his son, the alleged victim, legally emancipated himself from his parents soon after the allegations in 1993. He was asked to actually participate in the 2005 trial as a witness for the prosecution, but fled the country instead of doing so. As if things could not get any more weird, Evan Chandler, the same man you heard in that phone excerpt, committed suicide a few weeks after Michael Jackson died. The person who was really taking the lead in the process of criminally sanctioning Jackson was Tom Sneddon, District Attorney of Santa Barbara County, California. He was involved in initiating a raid on Jackson's Neverland Ranch, which, according to Jackson, was a deeply dehumanizing and invasive ordeal. This has fed the theory that Sneddon has constantly had it out to get Jackson and led to Jackson publishing a song entitled DS, standing for Dawn Sneddon, a pseudonym for Tom Sneddon. They're quite important for the purpose of the 2005 criminal trial, as the judge allowed the prosecution to refer to the 1993 allegations as evidence under the heading of a prior bad act. A prior bad act is when a judge allows evidence from a previous case to be brought in to show the motive or common scheme of the accused, if the evidence is connected to the case at hand. It's important to note that the 1993 settlement wasn't allowed to be brought in the 2005 case as evidence under the heading of a prior bad act because that concerned a civil matter and there was no admission of guilt affixed or attached to the settlement in the 1993 case. Now we turn to a more specific chronology leading up to the 2005 trial involving the key characters of that trial. So to proceed with a quick run through, in June 2000, the alleged victim in this case, Gavin Arvizo, contracts cancer, which attracted the attention of many celebrities. Gavin then requests to be in touch with Michael Jackson, and this was achieved through comedian Jamie Mazda. In August 2000, Gavin and his family, henceforth called the Arvizos, meet Jackson. Between August 2000 and September 2002, there was not a lot of contact between the Arvizos and Michael Jackson, but Jackson provided them with gifts such as an SUV and occasional access to Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch when he was not around. This all due to the fact that Gavin was obviously going through a very tough ordeal, the fact that he had contracted cancer. In the year 2003, a documentary directed by British journalist Martin Bashir about Michael Jackson's life was released, called Living with Michael Jackson. The documentary painted Michael Jackson in a very dubious light for his eccentricity and relationship with young people. There was actually a scene of Michael Jackson and Gavin in particular from the documentary that caused a lot of consternation. The Living with Michael Jackson documentary was arguably the impetus that set the criminal trial of 2005 in motion, as it applied political pressure for an investigation to take place into the relationship between Michael Jackson and young kids, which is what the district attorney, Tom Sneddon, responded to. From February 5th to 6th, 2003, in an attempt to fight the negative publicity resulting from the Bashir documentary, Jackson's team decides to hold a press conference with close associates of Jackson's, including the Arvizo family in Miami. Eventually, Jackson's team organized a rebuttal documentary to combat the narrative about Michael Jackson promoted in Martin Bashir's. The Arvizos are called to Neverland to participate in this documentary, as well as other associates of Michael Jackson. The rebuttal video or documentary consisted of interviews and footage captured by hidden cameras that Michael Jackson had in the same rooms that Martin Bashir's documentary was being recorded in. This was a smart move from Michael Jackson, as it meant he could portray in his rebuttal documentary footage that was deliberately or not excluded from the initial documentary promoted by Martin Bashir.
People say, why is he always with children? Well, I was raised in a world with adults. When kids were playing in bed sleep at night, I was up doing clubs. I was doing club dates, 3 in the morning. There was no Christmas, there was no birthdays, and we were very strict Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm compensating. So when you come behind my gate, you'll see amusement park, you'll see animals, you'll see everything I never got to do. There's candy everywhere.
The Arvizos remained at Jackson's Neverland Ranch between February 7th and the 12th of March, on and off. But this is where the story gets a bit murky. Initially, the Arvizos claimed that the child molestation began right after they returned from Miami, which is where the press conference took place on February 7th in 2003. But in the version of the story presented during the trial, the date changed to February 20th, 2003. This is an inconsistency that we're going to delve into and explore later on in the video. On November 18, 2003, an arrest warrant was issued for Michael Jackson based on allegations that he had sexually abused Gavin Arvizo. On the same day, 70 sheriffs raided Neverland Ranch to carry out a search warrant looking for evidence that might incriminate Michael Jackson. The most suspect material that they found were pornographic heterosexual magazines. On the 21st of April 2004, a grand jury indicted Michael Jackson and 14 charges were brought against him by the prosecution. Jackson was indicted on 4 counts of molesting a minor, 4 counts of intoxicating a minor to molest him, 1 count of attempted child molestation, 1 count of conspiring to hold Gavin and the Arvizos captive, and conspiring to commit extortion and child abduction. With a whopping 14 counts altogether, 10 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, the prosecution needed to prove Michael Jackson inappropriately touched a child below the age of 14 with the intent of arousing, appealing to, and gratifying the lust, passions, and sexual desires of Michael Jackson and the child beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a criminal standard of proof. If the jury had a reasonable doubt that any of these crimes occurred, then the hurdle of proof could not be overcome, and therefore Jackson could not be found guilty. This standard of proof is higher than the civil standard of proof, sure. However, with 14 counts in total, including 4 lesser misdemeanors, the defense team for Michael Jackson had a very significant job on their hands. Let's turn to the prosecution's narrative, or the prosecution's account of what actually happened. So the prosecution claimed that the family was invited back to Neverland, the Neverland Ranch, in the midst of the fallout from the Bashir documentary, and were retained in Neverland by Jackson and his team to keep the family away from the press. While at Neverland, the boys stayed in Michael Jackson's room. Who are the boys? One boy is Gavin Arvizo, the alleged victim, who we've already met so far in this video. But the other boy is Star Arvizo, who is Gavin's younger brother. The boys, allegedly, according to the prosecution, stayed in Michael Jackson's room for an extended period of time after a trip Michael Jackson organized to Florida to hold a press conference in response to the allegations circulating in the media after the Bashir documentary. This press conference, as we discussed earlier, designed to mitigate the reputational harm caused to Jackson's name by the Bashir documentary. The prosecution also stated that to get to Michael Jackson's room, there were many steps, including 2 doors and an alarm system to allegedly alert Michael Jackson about anyone approaching his room so that he could avert from any nefarious behavior and to make it harder to access Michael Jackson's room. On the plane back from Florida, where the press conference was held, it was alleged Michael Jackson served the accuser, Gavin, alcohol via a soda can. Many people were on the plane, including Michael Jackson's children, and Gavin's mother, Janet Arvizo, and his brother, Star Arvizo. Both of them are allegedly the only people to have witnessed the transmission by Michael Jackson to Gavin of alcohol via this soda can. Interestingly, Janet did not confront Jackson about this when she witnessed it on the plane. The prosecution claimed that Michael Jackson's handlers, or the people around him, attempted to move the Arvizos to Brazil permanently, but Janet did not want to go to Brazil, so got her kids out of Neverland and contacted an attorney to help her retrieve her possessions from Jackson. Michael Jackson is alleged to have shown Gavin and his brother Star pornographic magazines and to have served them with alcohol to desensitize them. The prosecution also alleges that Michael Jackson asked Gavin whether he masturbated and then assured him that everyone does it before masturbating Gavin as he masturbated himself, and then did this again for a second time. The only difference with the second occasion is that Michael Jackson tried to induce Gavin to masturbate him, but Gavin yanked his arm away from Michael Jackson's private parts. Both events allegedly took place after the rebuttal documentary and after the family's interview with the Department of Social Services, wherein the children claimed unequivocally never to have been inappropriately touched by Michael Jackson. Lastly, the conspiracy charge. It alleges that Michael Jackson and his associates conspired to abduct Gavin Arvizo and to falsely imprison the Arvizo family. According to the prosecution, the reason for this alleged abduction and false imprisonment was to force the Arvizo family to participate in the rebuttal documentary. To provide a summary of the prosecution's claims, I'm going to refer to Tom Sneddon's statement as part of the prosecution's opening statement during the criminal trial. Tom Sneddon, lead prosecutor of the prosecution, stated in the opening statement to the jury, "You will see this case as a product of the use of liberal doses of alcohol on a child with one kidney," referring to Gavin, one kidney stated because of the fact that Gavin, of course, had cancer. "The use of sexually explicit materials to whet the young boys' blossoming sexual awareness and the defendant's conversations encouraging them to masturbate and describing it as normal and natural, and manipulating the trust and the loyalty bond that had been created and the pacts of silence that you will hear about in the forbidden world and the forbidden conduct." Now let's turn to the rebuttals offered by Michael Jackson's defense team to the allegations brought forward by the prosecution. Jackson's defense challenged all of the allegations, and they did so by pointing to contradictions in the allegations provided by the prosecution and by strongly questioning the credibility of the Arvizo family. There was no material evidence pointing to Michael Jackson's guilt, such as DNA or written correspondence or blood, and so the credibility of the Arvizos, as with the credibility of any accusers in a similar situation, in a similar case, was of paramount importance. The first issue in the Arvizo story, identified by the defense, was the timeline. Initially, the alleged abuse began on February 7th. However, this date changed to February 20th, after footage emerged from the initial period stated, within which the Arvizo family had this to say about Michael Jackson following the Living with Michael Jackson documentary.
"It's a wish come true. For example, to see my children interact with an ideal role, a father role model. He plays with them, laughs with them. He lets them win."
My first impression was that he's a very loving, caring, humble man. He took us under his wing when nobody else would. He didn't turn us away like all the people were doing. and he gave my brother the extra little spark he needed in his mind, because my brother was to the point where he couldn't even move. He couldn't even talk.
Oh, we're on camera?
Yeah.
Oh.
We are? Yeah, I said rolling.
Oh, God! This is the outtakes of the out.
The next point that the defense made was how absurd it would have been for Michael Jackson to have begun abusing the alleged victim during this period. The eyes of the world were on Michael Jackson following the Living with Michael Jackson documentary by Martin Bashir. And after 3 years of knowing Gavin and not molesting him once, which is what was attested to by both the prosecution and the defense claimed it made no sense for the abuse to have started during a time when there was public uproar and media allegations of child abuse brought against Jackson because of the Bashir documentary, when tabloids were trying to track down the Arvizo family, when there was an investigation on Michael Jackson conducted by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department in response to the documentary, and as Jackson's PR and legal team were strenuously working to clean Michael Jackson's reputation following the reputational damage caused by the Bashir documentary. There were issues, the defense claimed, with the amount of times the abuse was claimed to have occurred in the prosecution's original statement of probable cause. It is stated in the prosecution's original statement of probable cause, which is, by the way, a statement that is usually issued to try and induce an arrest or a warrant, that Gavin describes at least 5 instances of abuse occurring from February 7th and March 10th, 2003. Notice, this is the initial period the prosecution claimed that abuse occurred during, before changing the date from February 7th to February 20th. However, in an interview with Sergeant Steve Robel on July 7th, Gavin stated the abuse occurred less than 5 times. In another interview with Sergeant Robel on August 13th, he claimed abuse occurred exactly 5 times, and later on in the same interview, he stated it occurred 7 times. Ultimately, during the actual trial, the total amount of times Gavin claimed to have been abused dropped to 2 times. In fact, when asked if abuse occurred more than 2 times during the trial, Gavin stated that it did not. At first, Gavin's brother Star Arvizo, in the prosecution statement of probable cause, claimed to have witnessed Jackson rubbing his private parts against Gavin's backside. This allegation was not made at the trial, however, and when Star was asked during cross-examination if he had made this claim in the past, despite the documentary evidence attesting to the fact that he had, he flat out denied it. In the Arvizo's interview with psychologist Dr. Stanley Katz, it was actually claimed that Star, as well as Gavin, was abused by Michael Jackson. However, as the Arvizo story evolved, this claim dissolved, and during the trial, the prosecution only claimed that Gavin was the victim of abuse. On the matter concerning heterosexual pornographic magazines being used to groom the young boys, the prosecution actually had a very strong case in that the boys' fingerprints were found on the magazines. However, the problem for the prosecution was that during the times when Gavin claimed to have been abused by Jackson, showing Gavin pornography never immediately preceded it, and Gavin claimed that when Jackson saw the magazines, he called them stinking and associated them with his associate Frank Cascio. The defense put the presence of the boys' fingerprints on the magazine down to the boys rummaging through Jackson's belongings regularly in a disruptive manner when he was not home, which a number of eyewitnesses corroborated, including a younger cousin of Jackson's who often played with the Arvizo brothers. The prosecution claimed that the Arvizos had not visited Neverland since March 2003. However, when shown a pornographic magazine dated August 2003, 5 months after the family stopped visiting Neverland, Star Arvizo claimed that that was one of the magazines Jackson had shown them, which was obviously a temporal impossibility. The defense also pointed out that if it were so, as the prosecution claimed, that there was an alarm system to notify Jackson about any intruder who tried to enter his room while he was doing something nefarious or wrong, surely he would have been notified when Star approached Jackson's room before he had a chance to witness anything occurring. Because Star Arvizo, according to the prosecution, had witnessed abuse occurring to Gavin on 2 occasions. So here the defense are saying, if the alarm system that Michael Jackson had in his room was created so that Michael Jackson could avoid anyone seeing him doing anything inappropriate with young people, surely Star should not have even had an opportunity to witness the occurrence of abuse on Gavin in the first place. The defense went on to state separately that there were 3 conflicting stories of how Janet Arvizo, the mother of both Gavin and Starr, found out about the abuse in the prosecution statement of probable cause. Janet initially claimed that she had learned about the abuse between February and March 2003, but in the same document, it is claimed that Janet was first informed of the abuse by law enforcement in September 2003. According to the family's civil lawyer, Larry Feldman, the same lawyer from the 1993 case involving Jackson, in June 2003, he sent Gavin Arvizo, the alleged victim, to psychologist Stanley Katz. Yes, the same psychologist who evaluated Jordan Chandler, the alleged victim in the 1993 case involving Jackson. And during this evaluation, allegations of child sexual abuse were first made. Feldman, the civil attorney who sent Gavin to Dr. Katz, then claimed that the findings of this evaluation were presented to him and that he presented it to Janet Arvizo, which was the first time Janet Arvizo heard of the abuse, conflicting with the prior two stories, which were supposedly the first times where Janet Arvizo heard of the abuse, and representing a big contradiction on the part of the prosecution. The defense drew on many facts to challenge the credibility of the Arvizo family, one of which was an incident involving the Arvizos and the J.C. Penney store in the year 1998. In this incident, Gavin had stolen school uniform from the store and was chased by security guards. After this, Janet got into a scuffle with the security guards. A year later, she claimed that during this scuffle, she was physically assaulted by one of the guards. Then, a year after this, she alleged sexual assault allegations, alleging the security guard touched her private areas and called her racial epithets. The case with J.C. Penney's, with J.C. Penney's was settled in 2001 for a whopping $152,000. In her 2005 testimony, Janet admitted to have lied in the J.C. Penney's case about how she incurred the bruises she attributed to the security guard, and her ex-husband, David Arvizo, stated that Janet used Gavin's cancer to pressure J.C. Penney's into settling the case. Furthermore, a lawyer that Janet worked with on this case claimed that Janet had informed her that she was lying, threatened the lawyer and her 9-year-old daughter if they did not cooperate, and also claimed to the lawyer that her children were going to acting classes so that she could tell them what to say and how to say it. Lastly, regarding the alleged conspiracy to falsely imprison the Arvizos, Michael Jackson's legal team was able to produce evidence that during the period of alleged captivity, the Arvizos went shopping on many occasions, attended a court for a child support matter involving Janet's ex-husband, visited a lawyer, and was interviewed by Child Protective Services due to the fallout from the Bashir documentary, and never once disclosed that they were being falsely imprisoned to authorities. Furthermore, the defense attempted to rebut the family's claim that Jackson and his team tried to deport them to Brazil to keep them away from the press by showing them the tickets that the Jackson team bought for the Arvizos were for a 1-week vacation. And through the testimony of Aja Pricer, then girlfriend to comedian actor Chris Tucker, who claimed that Janet Arvizo was very excited for the trip to Brazil and actually invited her to come along. One of the most important aspects of the trial was indeed the witness testimonies mounted by both the prosecution and the defense. It can be argued that if the convincing evidence and excellent lawyering from Jackson's defense team exonerated Jackson, then it was the witness testimonies that made Jackson's exoneration unequivocal. The problem with many of the prosecution's witnesses that may have tilted fortune's hand in Michael Jackson's favor was the fact that many of them had a vendetta against Michael Jackson. One category of witness that may fall under this bracket are the ex-employees that testified against Michael Jackson during the 2005 The 3 trial. Employees that testified against Jackson in the 2005 trial were ex-employees who were actually sacked by Jackson in their mid-90s, and after they were sacked, they filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Jackson, which Jackson won. Additionally, the court ordered those ex-employees to pay the legal fees for Jackson because of the fact that the reason why they were sacked was because they had stolen property from Michael Jackson. An example of one such employee who actually testified in 2005 was Adrian McManus. McManus was said to have stolen watches, posters, clocks, sunglasses, t-shirts, and laundry baskets filled with Michael Jackson clothes, and to have also stolen a drawing made by Michael Jackson of Elvis Presley, which he sold for $1,000. Between these disgruntled former employees of Jackson, claims were made that they witnessed Jackson sexually abuse Macaulay Culkin and Brett Barnes. However, both Barnes and Culkin testified during the trial and claimed that no such thing ever occurred. The prosecution also put forward Cynthia Bell, who was a flight attendant on the jet where the prosecution claimed Jackson served Gavin alcohol in a soda can. Miss Bell stated that it was her idea to put the wine in a soda can as the usual thermal that Jackson would use was not available at the time. She also stated that she never saw Jackson give alcohol to kids, that he had always been very nice, and that his intention in drinking from a soda can was to prevent the kids on board, including his own children, from knowing that he was drinking alcohol. In contrast, Bell described Gavin as being very rude and obnoxious. Two very strong witnesses put forward by the defense were celebrities George Lopez and Chris Tucker. The common denominator in both their testimonies was that they both heard of the Arvizos as a result of Gavin's cancer diagnosis and were asked by the family to donate money to help them cover the cost of the treatment, which the family claimed they could not afford. This despite the fact that the family's health insurance actually covered the entire treatment costs for Gavin's condition. Tucker claimed to have warned Jackson, who also associated with the family to help Gavin with his treatment, about Janet Arvizo. He stated that he was often emotionally manipulated by the family, who used Gavin's illness for sympathy, and on the stand defined Gavin as sophisticated and cunning. Both Tucker and Lopez eventually distanced themselves from the Arvizo family. Another witness was the iconic radio and television host Larry King. Due to his testimony containing a strong hearsay element, the jury were not allowed to be present to witness his testimony being made. However, King stated that Larry Feldman, the civil lawyer that represented the Arvizos, admitted to him that he did not believe the Arvizos, that Janet Arvizo was a wacko, and that the family only wanted money.
Case find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80.
The jury took 7 days to deliberate and returned a verdict of not guilty on all counts on the 13th of June 2005, including the 10 felonies and 4 more minor misdemeanors, with 9 jurors out of 13 voting to acquit Jackson. To say this was a sweeping victory for the defense is really, to say the least. In a post-trial article published by the New York Times, one juror was reported as stating, "We expected better evidence, something that was a little more convincing. It just wasn't there." And another juror from the same article, who was a retired school counselor, stated that we looked at all the evidence and we looked at Michael Jackson. And one of the first things we decided was we had to look at him just as another person and not a celebrity. Here's an interview with 6 of the jurors where they're asked how much Michael Jackson's celebrity influenced their deliberations.
Are you sure that this gigantically renowned guy walking in a room had no influence at all?
We talked about that when we first started the trial, and when we went into deliberations that came up. We talked about that quite intensively, I think. And we all felt that we have to look at this man just like we would anybody else, just anyone off the street, anyone in particular, just not look at him as a celebrity. In fact, as the trial was going on, we really didn't pay much attention to him. Once in a while you would look at him to see his demeanor, to see what he was, had certain questions or testimonies.
Now to speak briefly on jury selection and trial location. The trial took place in northern Santa Barbara, which was described by many covering the case as a relatively more conservative district, and the jury pool was made up of people who came from that region. Many people covering the case thought that this would work against Jackson, but Jackson's lead lawyer, Tom Mazzero, begged to differ. Jackson's defense team was actually advised not to have many women on the jury, especially mothers, because of the nature of the allegations brought against Michael Jackson. But Jackson's legal team, they chose to oppose conventional wisdom and actually opted to have as many women as possible on the jury. The rationale behind this was that women were seen by the defense team of Michael Jackson as being more open-minded and less likely to be swayed by Michael Jackson's peculiar, out-of-the-ordinary attributes, and instead to be focused on the evidence presented throughout the legal process of the case. There were no black Americans on the jury panel, but only one alternate black American juror. Some, including lawyer Carl Douglas, expressed that a more diverse jury pool that could culturally relate to Michael Jackson would have led to greater sympathy for his side of the story. Of course, this was not necessary or pertinent at the end as it pertains to Jackson's case, but is an important thing to bear in mind when it comes to trials. Especially trials when involving so much that's at stake. A narrative that I've heard from some people discussing this trial is that there was some disparity in the quality of lawyers represented, and it's something that I hear often whenever there are celebrity trials, especially celebrity trials with ordinary people. And there's a kernel of truth when it comes to this narrative in a general sense, but not in this case. Though Jackson was represented by Tom Mazzaro, who is arguably one of the greatest defense lawyers in recent American history and an idol of mine in many ways, the prosecution was represented by Tom Sneddon and Ron Zonen, who are equally some of the best prosecutors that the United States have produced in recent decades. So the battle of lawyers in this case was very much a battle of apples and apples rather than anything else. As for the media coverage of the trial, that was nothing short of a frenzy, with tabloids, newspapers, and legal programs all scrambling to share stories about the case and oftentimes misrepresenting what actually took place in the courtroom. Interestingly, both the prosecution and the defense felt the media was working against them in some way. To conclude with my closing thoughts, the Jackson case to me is a very important one, as I believe it is a clear example of the importance of due process. In preparation for this video, I surveyed many people, both virtually and in person, about the allegations brought against Jackson, and there were some interesting findings from the experience. Many people said they believed he was either guilty or were unsure of his guilt, and nearly everyone said their opinions were influenced by the media, and that they were not aware of the discoveries made in the evidence gathering process or the result of the 2005 trial. This is especially true in today's time, following the release of the accusatory documentary Leaving Neverland in 2019. When pressed to provide material evidence for their belief in Jackson's guilt, no one I spoke to was even aware of the background facts of the 2005 case, meaning their opinions were mainly swayed by what they perceived in the media. In the courtroom, this type of material, media pieces, documentaries, programs, are what is called hearsay evidence. It's not seen as indicative of a person's innocence or guilt. In fact, in the 2005 trial, I did mention this earlier, the Judge Melville, allowed for the jury to be shown the Living with Michael Jackson documentary released by Martin Bashir, which was supposedly a documentary that spun a narrative about Michael Jackson that was negative. And the judge, regardless of the contents of that documentary, made it a priority to emphasize to the jury that the jury cannot factor that in when deliberating on the question of Michael Jackson's innocence or guilt, as it is, in an evidentiary sense, useless. It's hearsay. It is somewhat comical, if not a judicial tragedy, that in the court of public opinion, hearsay evidence that is overtly one-sided in nature can do more to influence people's perception of someone's guilt or innocence than more substantive evidence. Another reason why many people that I interacted with on this question believe Jackson might have been guilty was his peculiarity. The change of his pigmentation, his nose, facial structure, the sound of his voice, his unusual lifestyle, essentially his attributes. This, to me, as a budding legal practitioner, is a highly suspect and very worrying mode of reasoning that is prone to serious injustice. It was this type of reasoning that concluded that women were more susceptible to demonic behavior and therefore more worthy of prosecution during the C&M witch trial. It was this type of reasoning that once upon a time concluded that men with my pigmentation were more likely to be complicit of crimes that they were accused of because of my pigmentation. Justice needs to be blind to a person's attributes, or else we open a door to a flood of injustice that we do not have the capacity to shoulder. I submit. Although the court of public opinion does not follow the same rules as a court of law, if spurious allegations based on brittle evidence can lead to guilt in the eyes of the public, too much power, I submit, is put in the hands of people who may have bad intentions. A culture of investigation and interrogation is the backbone of the legal system for a reason. And our pop cultural ecosystems, I submit, would benefit from this also. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. More content that is diverse in nature too is on the way. God bless. Oh, and by the way, please subscribe, like this video, share it with your friends. Eric Ehige is back making content. The world has just froze over.
Eric the Red, the prodigal son.